Poor people who have dated rich people, what did you learn?
They don't really have a concept of how rich they are. My ex-boyfriend was wealthy, but had a complex about how he was super poor. It was because all of his friends were also so wealthy, and he was maybe marginally less rich than some of them. He considered himself on the lower end of the scale. They don't really have a point of reference for how poor some people are. When we were together, I was living on a food budget of £50 a month, and he absolutely could not wrap his head around how a person could spend that little. I lived with a horrendously rich friend. His family are aristocracy in his home country. One thing I've noticed about him is that he's completely incapable of grasping that if I stop working, I just stop being able to eat. He was confused about why I was worried about taking a week off work, and didn't understand I was worried I'd lose money. He seemed to think that most people work because they choose to, because he's never had to work. Dated a man who didn't work, lived off of a trust fund. Oddly, since he could afford nearly anything, nothing had any value. He'd buy a $400 KitchenAid mixer, and burn it up making Christmas candy the first week. If he decided to make more candy, he'd just go buy another $400 mixer. Nothing meant particularly anything to him.
My ex-wife had a grandfather that was a multi-millionaire. Christmas time at their house was like being in another world. All of the different family members would try to get a moment with the king and kissed ass as much as possible. I spent my time down on the ground playing with my kids and was happy to get out of there. About a week or two after the second Christmas, I got a phone call from Grandpa. He wanted to know what he could do for my family. I told him I didn't want any of his money, but I would like my kids to know their great-grandfather. Later that year he showed up at our place unexpected and spent most of the afternoon telling stories with me about his youth. He set up a trust fund for each one of my kids to have their college paid for a little bit after that. He told me out of all of his in-laws I was the only one that never asked him for anything but to be himself.
I only went on one date with him. He booked out the entire bowling alley so we'd have privacy for our date. It just seemed so shockingly wasteful to me, and it was bizarre to have a 20-lane bowling alley just to the two of us plus a fair-sized staff who were left with nothing to do but look after us. I learned I'm very uncomfortable with that level of casual assumption that the world will rearrange itself to suit my whims. Also, he had absolutely no respect for personal space. I don't think he was used to women not liking to be touched by folks they barely knew.
How much easier it is to make money when you already have money. My wife's family has no concept of what a workday is. Dated a girl for 3 years who came from old money. She was fine, but her family was beyond out of touch with the real world. They were nice people but incredibly removed from the rest of the world. They looked at me like I was zoo animal in the sense that they were so curious about my life/family. They'd ask me what it was like going to public school. How my parents immigrated. They were baffled that not everyone had vacation homes or traveled a lot. The most interesting thing is that old money is much more powerful than new money. They belong to these clubs that consists of other rich families, and the influence they had was mind-blowing. Want to build a factory in an area not zoned for it? Within a week that was changed.
How real the network or bubble of it is. It's like the other side from the "it's expensive being poor" concept. It's this weird internal community of people with money, and thus power, who are willing to make things happen as long as you're in. I mean, I would meet people at a fundraiser or something and 5 minutes later, they're happy to make a call that will get me a job at some huge firm. Or like, my then boyfriend would say, "Let's go this concert. Tickets are $180, but it's okay, but a friend's parents have a box, so we'll just join them." Or even one time the dishwasher in our flat broke, but we didn't have to pay a dime for repairs, because his friend from high school's parents own the building, so they're fixing it for free as a favor.
I learned just how productive having money can be. Something needs to be fixed/replaced. We can afford to. Want to do something fun or adventurous? Sure, let's do it now. Want to eat healthier? We can afford all the ingredients. Like, what do you mean your life isn't slowed down by a million different things that need fixing / upgrading / replacing / saved for? I'm a guy who has dated women considerably wealthier than myself. My experience is that money becomes a factor sooner or later, no matter how closely you've connected on every other level. Even when the lady in question seems cool with it, there can be arch looks and withering comments from friends and family in social settings, about what you've just ordered for dinner, or what your holiday plans are. In those relationships I've ended up being made to feel like a bottleneck. I'm either the person who the woman spends money on more than vice versa, or the person whose income puts more restraint on evenly shared expenditure than would otherwise be the case. In either scenario, there's pressure, and even if the woman seems fine with it, there are people around her who no doubt would claim they're just looking out for her, who will cheerfully flag every instance where the difference in income is apparent. Money doesn't have to warp people, but it seems it often does, whether it's actually their own money or not.
He didn't have any concept of saving money, it was always just there because his money was always earning money. Having money was an income stream of itself. Also, he had no concept of how much anything cost. Was going to get some groceries for dinner and he gave me $300 to pick up some basics.
If you have a lot of money, people give you so much free stuff all the time trying to earn your business or procure donations. Ironic that the people who can best afford to pay for the items get comped the most.
Grew up poor, now middle class, and at 18 dated a super rich guy. First thing I noticed was the food. Not just quantities, but I also discovered so much food, like oyster, fresh fish, olives, things my parents could never buy. I also had to learn etiquette. My parents brought me up well, I read books all the time, was a decent student and well-behaved kid. But the way his family interacted was so different. I had to learn a lot of unwritten rules that I wasn't aware of. I think in the end what I actually learned was that even though my childhood was rough, the amount of stress of not having enough money has probably impacted me for life. I valued my parents so much more. Once I had seen what life was like for rich people, I was just so proud of my family for making it work with so much less.
The difference between having money and having wealth. You grew up poor and worked hard and finally got $10,000 in the bank and your income keeps you afloat? Cool. But that is nothing compared to a 50-acre family farm with a couple houses on it, several generations of inheritance that will fall in your lap someday. Family business or family connections to lucrative opportunities. Savings, investments, cash hidden in safes, piles of gold jewelry. If they suddenly lost all their checking and savings accounts, they'd still be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and wouldn't have to worry even for a second where their next meal would come from. Edit, also, owning cars you don't even need or ever drive. Hordes of stuff sitting around cause you never had to move or sell stuff to buy food. Lines of credit being thrown at you.